Okay, today we're going to go ahead and get into section 2.3 notes. All right, so we're going to be looking at slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines in this chapter. All right, so slope, we did in algebra before. It's going to come up again here, so we're going to look at two ways to do the slope. All right, the first way is if we have a picture, we can count rise over run. All right, so we can count up or down first, and then we can count over. So for example, if you look at the picture, and I start down here at the dot, I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so 6 up, and then I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll notice the slope is 6 over 4 then. And we can reduce 6 over 4 and call it 3 over 2. All right, so from a picture, we count rise over run. So up and down first, and then left or right, and make sure you reduce your fraction. If they give us ordered pairs and we have to do the slope formula, all right, then we're going to stay with the pattern. So our slope formula will be y minus y over x minus x. Now remember, if you start with the first y, then you got to start with that same x from the ordered pair. So stay with your pattern. All right, so y is on top, x is on bottom when we do the formula. Okay, for this picture, we're going to use rise over run to find the slope. All right, so if we're counting from a picture, we want to count rise first, run second. All right, so let's find line AC. AC is this line right here. All right, we are going to start at one of the points, and we are going to count up or down first, and then over. So let's say I start at point C, and my goal is to get to point A. I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I went up 5. And now I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Left 6 would be negative. I cannot reduce it. So we have our first slope of 5 over 6 for line 8, 5 over negative 6 for line AC. All right, next one says find line CD. So let's find line CD and highlight it. So I'm looking at this line here. The 2 points that are on this line are at point D and point C. All right, again, it doesn't matter which one we start at. We'll get the same answer either way. So I'm going to start at D, and I'm going to go up 1 first. Then I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right 6 would be 1 over 6. I cannot reduce it. So we have our slope of line CD by counting our picture. All right, let's get rid of some of these dots in here. Here we go. All right, let's find line AD now. AD, you'll notice, is this vertical line straight up and down. All right, any line that runs straight up and down has a slope that is undefined. All right, which makes sense. If we were to count from A to D, we would go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'd go down 6 and over 0. Anytime 0 is on the bottom, we call it undefined. All right, so if you can remember a vertical line is undefined, you could do it that way. If you did the slope, you ended up with a 0 on the bottom. We can never have 0 in the denominator, so it would become automatically undefined. All right, our last one, AB, if we highlight AB, all right, a horizontal line always has a slope of 0. All right, if we were doing this, we would have started at A and counted to B, so rise over run, I would go up or down 0. And then I would go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, 0 on top of a fraction is always just equal to the 0. All right, so when we count slope of a picture, rise over run. All right, here we go with the main part for today. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at, are the slopes parallel or perpendicular? All right, so if we do the slope formula, and we get the same slope for both answers, then we call them parallel lines. So parallel lines have same slope. All right, so after we do the slope formula, if it's the same, we'll call it parallel. Now, in order for it to be perpendicular, it has to be opposite reciprocals. Opposite reciprocals, okay? So what that means is, let's say the slope of our first line is 3 over 5. The opposite reciprocal of that would be to flip it, 5 over 3, and because the first one was positive, the second one is negative, so it's opposite and flipped. All right, so perpendicular lines are when the slopes are opposite reciprocals. They're flipped and switched. All right, so again, another example of that could be something like negative 2 over 5 is our first slope. The opposite reciprocal would be to flip it and to switch it. So I flip the numbers and I switch the sign. It was negative in the first one, so it's positive in the second. All right, be careful if they give you something like this. All right, let's say the slope of your first one was 4. The opposite reciprocal would be negative 1 over 4 because technically there's an invisible 1 underneath there. All right, so parallel lines will have the same exact slope. Perpendicular lines, the slopes will be flipped and switched. If it's neither one of those, then they're not parallel or perpendicular. Okay, let's go ahead and try an example, and let's look at it. This says use the slope formula, so we're going to be using y minus y over x minus x. The graph is just here to help here, but we won't be using the graph at all. It says to find it for uv, and it says to find it for xy. So we're going to be doing two slope problems. The first one, I'm going to use u and v. All right, remember our formula over here, y minus y over x minus x. So let's take the y's first. 2 minus a negative 1. So I started with the 2 for the y's. I'm going to start with the 0 for the x. Minus a negative 1. Notice the sign in the equation, and we plug in the number. All right, 2 minus a minus 1 is 3. 0 minus a minus 1 is positive 1, and I can't reduce that. So the slope of uv is 3 over 1. Now, they want us to compare xy. So I'm going to do y minus y. So 1 minus 3, and then 3 minus a negative 3. All right, 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 3 minus a negative 3 is 6, but I can reduce this to negative 1/3. All right, that's our xy. Now, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the slopes. First, I'm going to ask myself, are they exactly the same? If they are, they're parallel. Well, 3 over 1 and negative 1 over 3 is not exactly the same, so they are not parallel. All right, the second thing I'm going to check is, did it flip and switch? So if my first one was 3 over 1, did it flip and switch to negative 1 over 3? Well, yes, it did. It's opposite reciprocal. So if it's opposite reciprocal, we call it perpendicular. All right, so we're going to do the slope formula for the letters they tell us. Then we're going to go back and ask ourselves, are they parallel? If they are, they're the same. Are they perpendicular? Did the answers, the slopes, flip and switch? Or neither if it doesn't fit either criteria. All right, let's try another one. Use the slope formula. So again, we got y minus y over x minus x. They want us to compare GH and IJ. So let's start off with GH. Let's do our slope formula. So negative 2 minus 2. Negative 3 minus 1. That gives me negative 4 over negative 4, which reduces to negative 1 over negative 1, which just equals 1. So we found the slope of GH. All right, let's go back and do IJ now. 4 minus a negative 4, negative 2 minus 2. 4 minus a negative 4 is positive 8. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. If I reduce that, it's going to turn into 2 over negative 1 for our slope. And that was ij. I'm going to compare the slopes. Are they the same? No, they're not parallel. Are they flipped and switched? No, they are not. They do not match either case, so we call this neither. All right, let's go to our last one. Use the slope formula to determine if CD is parallel to EF. Slope formula is y minus y over x minus x. It wants us to do CD. So, negative 3 minus 1 and negative 1 minus 1. That gives me negative 4 over negative 2, which will reduce to positive 2 over 1 for CD. Next, I'm going to do EF. 1 minus 3 and negative 1 minus 0. That gives me negative 2 over negative 1, which will reduce to a positive 2 over 1 for EF. I'm going to compare the slopes. First, I check, are the slopes the same? Well, yes, they are exactly the same. So we call these parallel lines because they have the same slope. So we will do the slope formula. If both answers are the same, it's parallel. If both slopes are completely different, it's neither. If both slopes are opposite reciprocals, so they're flipped and switched, then we call it perpendicular. All right, that's section 2.3. We're going to go ahead and do some practice now in class.